Hi, I'm Jessica coming to you live from Nautilus Mission Control at the Inner Space Center in Rhode Island. We're joined today by the Chief Scientist for the Nautilus, Katy Croff Bell. And Katy is currently in the studio on the ship, which is off the coast of Portugal in the Atlantic Ocean. For the next 20 minutes or so, she'll be answering your questions live. So if you have any questions for Katy, feel free to type them in along with your name and the state where you live using the Send a Question form to the right. Now keep in mind, Katy is about 5,000 miles away, so there'll be a slight delay between my question and her answer. Also, if you want to get back to the live action on the ship, feel free to switch over to Channel 2 or to the Quad. All right, so let's get started. Welcome, Katy. Thank you so much for being with us today. And before I take any questions from the audience, I wanted to ask you if you could give us a little run through of what we've seen so far this 2011 season.
Absolutely, Jessica. Thank you so much for having me, first of all. We're very excited. We're about halfway through our third month of a 4-month field season here. We've been working in Turkey, Greece, Italy, Spain, and now Portuguese waters. And during that 3.5 months, we've had an unbelievable number of discoveries. We've found somewhere between 20 and 25 previously undiscovered shipwrecks. So many at this point that I've lost count and need to go check the records. We've also spent over a month exploring underwater volcanoes in Greece and Italy, where we've been looking at all sorts of exotic life forms living on very hot mineral-rich waters that are coming out of the seafloor. And now we're working off the coast of Portugal, where we're hoping to find some sort of evidence of recent geologic activity. This is an area where it hasn't been close to the mid-ocean ridge, which is where new crust, new Earth is formed for quite some time, over 100 million years. But there is a process by which hydrothermal activity can occur, and that's simply by the interaction between water and a particular type of rock called peridotite, which makes up actually over 80% of the planet. So we're very excited to be out here right now. We've had one dive under our belt where we've seen all sorts of exotic deep-sea creatures, sponges and corals, and all kinds of crazy fish. And right now, unfortunately, we're a little bit out of commission. We've had a problem with our cable that connects the ship to Argus. But right now, we have a team of engineers that are troubleshooting the problem, and we hope to get back into the water tomorrow. So I guess at this point, we can go to some questions.
Yes, we can, and I've got some questions coming in. The first question is, have you seen any whales?
We actually have seen whales, not underwater, not with the robotic vehicles that we use, Hercules and Argus, but on the last leg when we were off the coast of Spain, there was a huge pod of pilot whales. I think about 40 or 50 of them that were interested in Nautilus and seeing what we were doing, and in fact one of those whales had a baby while we were out here. I think there might be a highlight video on the Nautilus Live website, so you can check that out and see the whales for yourself.
Yes, there definitely is a highlight video, so check that out. The next question is, what is the speed of the ship?
The speed of the ship, well, when we are transiting around like we are right now, we typically cruise at a speed of about 10 to 11 knots. And that's at about 10 to 11 miles per hour. So it's very, very slow to travel around on the ocean. When we're working with the vehicles, we travel no faster than about 1 or 1.5 miles an hour. So the vehicles are very, very slow.
And I guess sort of a related question, how long does it take to recover Hercules and Argus?
That's a great question, and the answer actually depends on the depth at which we're working. It takes approximately an hour per 1,000 meters to go up or down. So when we're working at 3,000 meters water depth like we were a couple of days ago, it takes 3 hours to get to the bottom. It's a very long commute to get to work.
And I know you've been in a bunch of different seas. This question is, are the seas generally rougher in the Atlantic than in the Mediterranean or Aegean?
Great question. We've actually seen a combination of both flat calm seas and rougher ones. Almost everywhere that we've been working. At the very beginning of the cruise, we had some pretty bad weather in the Black Sea. And also when we were off the coast of Italy, we saw some very, very choppy seas. A huge storm came rolling through, and we were out of commission for about 2 or 3 days, unfortunately. On our way out here to the Atlantic, the swells were much larger and slower to get to us. It wasn't very choppy, but we had a decent number of people who weren't feeling so well. So right now it's beautiful, flat, calm, so we hope that we can get back in the water soon and take advantage of this great weather.
Well, I'm glad that people are feeling better. This next question is, what is your favorite part of being out at sea?
Ooh, my favorite part. There are a lot of favorite parts. I really love being out here. One of the most favorite is actually just being out here and being able to explore. We have an unbelievable opportunity to use our robotic vehicles, Hercules and Argus, and there's no way we're going to find anything if we don't have them down on the seafloor exploring. So really the most exciting thing is what we might find tomorrow or the next day.
And I guess as a follow-up question to that, what is the most challenging part of life at sea?
One of the most challenging parts, well, for me personally, I do get seasick, and I was not feeling very well the last couple of days, so that made working and staring at a computer screen very difficult. One of the most challenging things is just dealing with everything, the unpredictable. Sometimes components on the vehicles break and we're not able to do work, and the engineering team has to stay up all night fixing it, or sometimes we have bad weather and we're not able to do work. So really the most challenging thing is making sure that everybody on the team has what they need to make sure that we can stay down on the bottom and exploring the oceans as much as we possibly can. I'd say that was the most challenging thing, is make sure everybody has what they need and that we can do our best to keep on exploring.
Awesome. Well, the next question is, how deep were the underwater canyons?
The underwater canyons. We've actually explored several areas of underwater canyons, and they range from, for example, the ones off the coast of the east coast of the United States. They get from about 200 meters, deep off the edge of the continental shelf, and go down into 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 meters of water. These are very, very huge canyons. It's not just like, a canyon you see on the side of the freeway. These are massive, massive features, and they have pretty big implications when sediment is destabilized and you have landslides going down these canyons. The mixing of the sediment with the water and the transport of nutrients and biological creatures, how they get from shallow to deep water, is a very active field of research right now.
And now we have a question from Stuart from Middle Magnet School in Tampa, Florida. And Stuart would like to know, what is the weirdest thing you've seen with the ROV?
The weirdest thing we've seen with the ROV. I think one of the weirdest things is when we are in Colombo volcano. This is an underwater volcano in Greek waters. It's in the Aegean Sea. And in these waters, there are no fish, there are no crabs, there are no other organisms that we would expect to find in the deep sea. All we see is orange and yellow and white and gray bacteria, and that's really it. So that's one of the strangest and eeriest things, is when we don't see any sort of other biological life, the fish and corals and sponges and other things that we typically see down here. Great question, Stuart.
And the next question is, what is the deepest dive you've done?
The deepest dive so far this year has been to about 3,000 meters. That's the one that we just completed. But the vehicles are rated to 4,000 meters, which is the average depth of the world's oceans. And we have used the Hercules and Argus to get down to 4,000 meters. Several years ago, for example, in 2004, we were diving on the shipwreck of the Titanic, and that lies at about 4,000 meters. So we have gone that deep. We just haven't done it yet this year.
Yeah, that's pretty deep. The next question is from Mrs. Croft's class. How old are the volcanoes and how tall are the volcanoes?
How old are the volcanoes and how tall are the volcanoes? Well, one of the things we're studying is how old they are. We don't actually know how old a lot of these features are. Some of them no one's ever looked at before, so we collect a lot of geological samples so that we can do analysis of the chemistry of the rocks and try and determine how old they are. And as far as how tall they are, Colombo volcano is 500 meters deep at the very deepest inside the crater, and it gets almost all the way up to the surface. In the Aeolian arc, we were down more than 1,000 meters at the base of some of these features, and they would rise up to somewhere in the range of about 100 meters or so. So these are pretty tall features. Thank you, Mrs. Croft's class.
The next question is a two-part question. How do you feel about your expedition so far, and what do you think was the most important part of the expedition so far?
Well, I feel fantastic about the expedition so far. We've had about 2.5 months so far under our belts, and we have about a month and a half left to go. We've made all sorts of very exciting discoveries, and I'm really excited to see what comes out of the next month and a half. We are here off the coast of Portugal for another week, where we'll be exploring the Gorange Bank, the seamounts of Gettysburg and Ormond. So I'm very, very excited to see what we find here, and we'll also be headed back to Italy, where we'll be exploring just south of Sicily in an area that is known to be volcanically active, particularly in the last couple hundred years. So it'll be very interesting to see what lies in store for us down there. And we'll wrap up the season off the coast of Israel in November, where we'll be looking again at the continental shelf and slopes, and we just might find some more shipwrecks there. So what I'm most excited about is what we haven't found yet, and then I'll be able to tell you at the end of the season what was most important.
This next question is very interesting. It's, can the data gathered by this expedition benefit us, humans and animals, etc.?
Can the data that we gather benefit us? I certainly hope so. I mean, that's one of the reasons that we're exploring out here, is so that we can determine what kind of life is here, what kind of species lie here that we've never explored before, we've never seen, how the interactions between the life forms work together. Also exploring the history of our Earth and how the systems work between the geology and the chemistry of the oceans, and also obviously the biology that lives off of them. So that is one of the primary reasons why we're out here exploring, not just because it's really cool and it looks really neat on video, but also so that we can use this data to understand more about how the planet works.
Awesome. Well, the next question is back to hydrothermal vents. What is the temperature of the hot water coming up from the ocean floor?
Oh, well, we've seen hydrothermal vent activity on the Nautilus. Other expeditions have been to other parts of the world, but here the hottest one that we've recorded so far is in Colombo, the submarine volcano in Greece, and it's over 200 degrees Celsius. The ambient water, or the water that surrounds the volcano, is only about 13 or 14 degrees Celsius. So that's over 200 degrees centigrade more than the surrounding water. So it's very, very hot.
Yeah, that is very hot. And the next question is, how are underwater volcanoes formed?
Excellent question. There are 3 different ways of forming underwater volcanoes. The first and certainly the most common, they're underwater volcanoes all over the world, all in the ocean basins. And this is formed by tectonic plates moving apart. And when they move apart, they leave a gap. And that gap is filled by mantle and magma and what turns out to be lava when it comes out onto the seafloor. And so that's one of the ways, is you have plates moving apart and you have the magma coming up and volcanoes being formed. Another way is what's called a hotspot. You might be familiar with the Hawaiian volcanic chain, and that doesn't lie anywhere near a spreading center or these areas where plates are moving apart, but there has been significant volcanic activity there for millions of years. So what's happening there is there's a very active part of the mantle that is spewing magma up, and it's breaking through the Earth's crust and creating these volcanoes. And as the plate moves across this very active area, you get an island chain. And that's how Hawaii was formed. Now the third way is when you have tectonic plates moving toward each other. And these are typically oceanic plates that are moving toward each other, or oceanic and continental plates. And what happens is one of the plates moves underneath the other one, And that plate has a lot of water inside the sediment as it's going down, and that water mixes with the mantle, or this very hot rock that's underneath the plates, and it melts. And when it melts, it rises up, and then it again breaks a hole in the Earth's crust and creates a volcano. So that's how islands like Santorini, or all of the volcanoes on the west coast of the United States, Mount St. Helens, for example, was formed.
And I know
Excellent question.
And I know that there's a behind the science video on the website about how volcanoes are formed, so you should definitely check that out. Okay, Katie, we have another question from Mrs. McFarland's class at Stewart Middle Magnet. Have you ever found any shipwrecks or artifacts on this journey?
On this journey, we have found a large number of shipwrecks and artifacts. A lot of times we just find amphoras. These are the ancient clay vessels that people would have transported olive oil or wine or fish sauce or other commodities around the ancient world. And sometimes we just find those scattered around on the seafloor, just like we find Coke cans or plastic bags, which are the trash of today. But we also have found a very large number of shipwrecks this year, somewhere between 20 and 25. They just found one more on the last leg when they were working off the coast of Spain. And these range in age from very, very modern all the way back to the Hellenistic period, so over 2,000 years old. It's very exciting, and we hope to do a lot of research on these shipwrecks and find out exactly where they were going, where they were coming from, the interactions between people, and potentially what they were carrying as well.
So we found a lot of shipwrecks. This next question is, how many underwater volcanoes have you found on this expedition?
How many underwater volcanoes? Well, there are a number of volcanoes that we have explored that we suspected were volcanic based on the area that we were working in. It's a known area, for example, in the Aeolian Arc. This is the area north of Sicily in the Mediterranean Sea, kind of between Italy and Sicily. And these volcanoes are related to the same system as Vesuvius, which erupted in 79 AD when the Romans were living there and completely covered the area. It's also related to Stromboli and Mount Etna, which are located. Mount Etna is on Sicily itself, and Stromboli is a volcanic island inside the Tyrrhenian Sea. So when we look at the bathymetry, this is a map of the seafloor. So when you look at a topographic map of the Earth, you can see mountains and valleys and rivers. And so what we use to study the topography of the seafloor is called bathymetry. When we look at a bathymetric map, we can see mountains underneath the water. And these are areas that we suspected would be volcanic or would have some sort of volcanic activity. And I believe we visited about 5 or 6 of them on this past expedition to the Aeolian Arc. We didn't find any active volcanic activity happening right now, no lava spewing out, but we did find hydrothermal systems, and this is where water is seeping into the crust and it's getting heated by the hot rock that's just underneath the crust and coming back out. And so we have very hot, very mineral-rich water coming out. And on that water and on the minerals that are coming out, we find bacteria, and then a lot of stuff eats the bacteria, for example, tube worms, and then we find all sorts of crabs and fish and sea urchins and other things that live in these communities on the volcanoes. So it was very exciting to see all these different types of systems that we don't see here on land.
Yeah, it's been very, very cool watching too from our point of view. Georgie from Massachusetts now would like to know, what is the best part of life on the Nautilus?
Great question, Georgie. We work very, very hard here on the Nautilus, but we do have a lot of fun here. We have an amazing team of people from all over the world. We have scientists and engineers and historians, geologists, biologists, people that run the engine room, people that drive the ship. One of the most fun things for me is working with this huge, diverse array of people from all over the place. It's really fun to get to know people and learn their customs and go to different countries and work with local scientists. So that's definitely one of the highlights for me being out here.
And the next question is, what made you want to be a geologist?
Interesting question. I actually, when I went to college, studied engineering. I studied ocean engineering. And when I was in my junior year, I found out about a project going to the Black Sea to look for shipwrecks. And I raised my hand and said, I want to go and work on that project. And so I was one of the students that was selected, and I got to go out to sea with Dr. Robert Ballard to look for shipwrecks in the Black Sea. And after that, I got really turned on to maritime archaeology, so I went and got my master's in archaeology at the University of Southampton. And shortly after that, Dr. Ballard was starting a program called Archaeological Oceanography at the University of Rhode Island. And so 7 years ago, I started my PhD, and I was coming out on cruises every year and studying all sorts of different things. And one of the things that piqued my interest was the geology of Santorini volcano and the Aegean, and so that's what I ended up doing my dissertation on, was some of the data that we collected during one of the 2006-2007 cruises on some of the submarine landslides and how the area is very volcanically and seismically active. So it really came out of just experience being out here and the kind of data that we collected. And it's been a really fun mix of the engineering and the archaeology and the geology, putting it all together for me out here on the Nautilus, because we get to do it all.
And it looks like we've got 2 more questions for you, Katy. Hunter from Mrs. Duguay's class in Maine would like to know, how can you compare your journey from last year to this year?
Interesting question, Hunter. Well, this year we are going to a lot of new places that we didn't go to last year. I'd say in general both have been very, very successful. We found over a dozen new shipwrecks last year. We found over 20 new shipwrecks this year. So we're just covering a lot more territory, a lot more area. It's really fun to go to some new places. This year's the first time I've been to Italy and Spain, and we're also working with some Portuguese scientists here off the coast of Portugal, so it's fun to kind of expand our horizons and go to some new places.
And I have one final question for you, Katy. What's it like to have thousands of people all over the world watch you work live?
Very interesting. A lot of times, since we're so isolated out here on the ship, sometimes you just kind of forget that you have potentially thousands of people watching. But one of the most exciting things for me being out here, in addition to working with all these different types of scientists and engineers, is having the ability to share what we're doing with everybody back on shore. Just 10 years ago, we weren't able to do this when I started doing this type of work, and so it's really, really fun to have people writing in questions to the website and learning about what we're doing, and us having the opportunity to share all of the work and all the excitement of the discovery with people back on shore. So I encourage everybody who's watching now to keep tuning in. We hope to be back in the water tomorrow. We'll see how everything goes with the cable, but hopefully so. And I really encourage everybody to continue writing in all your great questions. We have a great team of educators aboard right now, and also scientists and engineers who are out here and ready and willing and more than happy to answer anything that you guys can fire at us. So keep on exploring with us out here on the Nautilus.
Well, thank you so much, Katy, for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to talk to you.
And thank you to the audience for sending in all of those great questions. Now, if you have more questions for Katy, we are going to be talking to her again today at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, so tune in for that. And we've got more live events coming up later this season. We've got a quick Q&A with the Jason Argonauts on Monday, October 24th. That's going to be at jason.org/live at 1:30 and 6:30 p.m. Eastern. And we're talking to Dr. Bob Ballard on Friday, October 28th, also at 1:30 and 6:30 p.m. Eastern, so tune in for those. Again, I'm Jessica here at Nautilus Mission Control. Stay tuned at nautiluslive.org. And now back to the action on the ship.